What's going on, guys? Vulkan here, and today we're going to be talking about the biggest changes coming with the Into the Void update. First off, this update is massive. This is the first major content patch coming to New World, and there is a lot packed in here. There's a lot of little tiny things that might really affect you as a player, but might not affect other people. So because of that, I have put the link in the description below that has all of the update notes, all of the balance stuff, the nerfs, the buffs, everything. This video is going to cover the big things that I think are going to be the most important, and they're going to affect the most amount of players. So let's go ahead and let's get started with new stuff. So what is coming to New World that is brand new and we can start messing with? So number one, we have the Void Gauntlet. Now, this weapon is super fun. We saw it data mined, and it has some really good potential to pair well with other weapons. So I was out on the PTR. I've spent a ton of hours, to be honest with you, playing with this weapon and trying to figure out what are the best kind of setups for it. And right now, I really didn't get a great chance to test it fully, I will say, because we're given random gear and you're kind of just left up to luck to get the perk rolls you need. So it really wasn't a true min-max test, but with a completely optimized build, I was able to clear some elites and malevolence. And the thing I really love about this weapon is just how easy it is to self-heal, and that really makes solo jobs easier to handle. Now, I'm not sure how it's going to do in top end, end game PvP or high end dungeons, but for now it works well for someone looking to clear tough encounters by themselves. I have a Shadow Priest build that I've plotted out. I'm going to be releasing this as well to give you guys a starting point for how to build around this weapon. They've added some new human enemies called the Varangian Knights. So these guys are going to patrol the southeastern realm of Aeternum. They also drop a new weapon type from the named knights, so be sure to look out for that. Now, these guys are really interesting. So you first get their quest in North First Light, or in Everfall, and it's a quest called Visions of the Invaders. So if you find that, you can head out to that section and you'll be able to see these Varangian Knights. Now, the interesting thing is these guys are the exact same as like PvP, right? They use the exact same abilities. You'll see the folks with like the Great Axe. They're going to be doing whirlwinds. They're going to be going out and doing reaps to pull towards you or pull you towards them and do all these other things. The sword and shield, which is actually a mace and shield, which I think is very interesting. Hopefully we'll get those soon. They will do Defiant Stance to buff up their allies and provide protection for themselves. They will do shield rushes. They'll do shield bashes. So you have all of these kind of things that are going to play into it to make it very interesting when it comes to encounters. Now, they also added some new enemies to existing factions like the Swarmmancer, Beetles, Shamans, the Alligator Pet, and the Skeleton Mage. So these are cool. They're pretty different. They also bring some new abilities. So it's not just the same old you're going to be fighting against. So you'll see some new stuff out there, which is really cool. Now, one of the biggest things I think that in terms of an issue with New World was this game just really did lack a lot of variety in pretty much everything. And they decided with this patch, now is the time to start injecting more variety into the game. So in terms of PvP missions, they did add more variety. These are faction missions. You're going to be able to take over forts. You're going to be able to go and actually capture some war camps and then intercept and kill enemy faction members. That way there's a little bit more push to do some PvP rather than just not flagging and avoiding things completely. Now, also after listening to the players, they did update the faction change timer from 120 days to 60 days, literally cut in half. So if you're someone who is really looking forward to switching factions, you're not gonna have to wait too much longer to do that. Now, to all those who are power leveling using cooking, so this era has officially passed. Cooking territory gains have been nerfed. I'm sorry. You're going to have to find a different way to get through and power level either your cooking skill or your actual character level. But for those who said leveling trade skills was far too easy, they heard you loud and clear. Because guess what? Crafting experience requirements have been increased to progress your trade skills. Also, they made it so you can no longer craft a ton of iron quality weapons to progress past steel. You will need to craft steel in order to progress. This brings it in line with other MMOs, so you have to craft the current highest thing you can in order to get the most bang for your buck and in order to push that trade skill to the next level. And to build on listening to the players, they've also linked all of the trading posts together. So that means you can buy anything from anywhere. You'll have to pay whatever fee of the settlement that you're currently at, but beyond that, you can purchase anything from anywhere you want, which is great. Now, this next one was a really big one for me. So the questing variety was really bad, and it pushed a lot of people away. They didn't even make it past level 30. It was crazy. So to combat this, they have updated the main quest line to be more engaging and have more variety. You're gonna have things like new wave-based events, destructible objects you have to kind of track down and destroy, and then you have to have some proximity nodes you'll have to track down and find. So a lot more interactivity, which is gonna be good, and less find 10 chests, kill 10 enemies. Now this next one is a huge PSA for anyone that's still questing or anyone that's just now starting the game. You have two quests, Old Stone Remembers and New Initiate, Old Order. These have both undergone big changes, and because of this, these quests will need to be reset, and the player will need to go back and talk to Jonas in Fisherman's Bend to re-accept either one of these quests. Now, to pair up with all of the new quests, they also added some more visual variety to the starter zones, and this is a big one. So all of the starting areas looked exactly the same. It was just like forest, right? And it wasn't until you reached Brightwood that you actually saw some different visuals, which was far too long. Most players didn't even make it there. So I'm really glad they tackled this. They added some corruption and some withered areas to introduce that a bit more, and they changed things up to be less, woodsy, so which I really like. Now, don't expect to go in and like everything looks completely different. These are just minor pepperings, but there's something that gives it a little bit of oomph rather than just, oh, there's another tree for the millionth time. Now, this last one that we talk about in this section is pretty big. So this is something that people have been at it, and honestly, I first saw it on Reddit, so I'm curious if they took this and ran with it, but you will now get a 10% movement speed buff on roads. So as long as you're running on a road, you're going to move 10% faster. Now, there are a few caveats. So this is canceled in combat or when you dodge or you roll. What I've noticed is this is tied to your stamina bar. If your stamina bar is not at 100%, you will not get the 10% movement speed buff. You will only get it while you're running. Also, this seems to not work on bridges, so keep that in mind too. As you run across a bridge, you'll see your little movement speed buff start to tick down and eventually disappear if the bridge is fairly long. So again, keep that in mind. I submitted that feedback, so hopefully we'll get that changed shortly, because a bridge is part of a road. It's just going over water, so I don't know if it's going through your character position and what it's interacting with. But anyway, bridges will not get that movement speed buff. Okay, so we covered those big things that are coming to the game, the brand new stuff, but let's cover some of the kind of miscellaneous key changes that will affect people. Now, these are just kind of like all over the place. I didn't really fit them into a single category because they were so sporadic, but these are really, really cool. So one, no more sheep missions for lower level players. I can't tell you how many times I saw players under level 20, under level 30 that were just like, where are all the sheep at? Where are all the sheep? And this was one of those town board projects I told people to avoid like the plague because sheep were so hard to find. So they ended up taking these completely out, so you will not see sheep missions as a lower level player. They changed the damage reduction bonus at 250 constitution. Before, it was you had an 80% damage reduction on your first incoming strike. Now it's 60%, so it's a 20% decrease. So for you tanks, for you PvP tanks, keep that in mind. You're not going to get as big of a reduction from that first hit. They also increased light armor wear healing bonus. So for those who are wearing light armor, the healing bonus got increased to 30%, and then medium armor got increased to 15%, which are pretty significant increases. They also increased the leech perk on rings and weapons to be much more impactful. Before, it was a range of 0.5% to 1.5%, so 0.5 to 1.5. Now the range is 1% to 5%. So if you roll a 5% leech on both of your rings, you're looking at 10% leech coming off of whatever damage you're outputting, which is pretty decent, to be honest with you guys. Then we have Outpost Rush. So this is just one thing. Battle Bread has been reduced from 15% increased damage and defense to 5%. So keep that in mind. You're not going to be able to have as significant of a buff by purchasing and eating Battle Bread. Okay, so here are some big ticket items for you guys. Now, this is our first huge sandbox update to all of the weapons, and we're going to talk about what things are changing and how they're encouraging build variety. Now, if you want specifics on each buff and nerf, please check the link below. But for now, let's go ahead and dive headfirst and get started with the Warhammer. So for the Warhammer, basically what they were looking at was the Juggernaut tree is not being used at all. The Crowd Crusher tree is pretty much the only tree. So they went through and they buffed pretty much everything in the Juggernaut tree. So it's going to be much more useful and should be on par with the Crowd Crusher. Now for the Life Staff, they wanted to make medium and light armor more appealing. So they reduced the base healing of Life Staff by 20% across the board, which is pretty significant. They also made it so group UI will change color when the target's out of range, and you'll no longer self-heal when they are. They nerfed all of the Sacred Ground nodes, so this spell will be a little bit weaker. They increased the efficiency of Splash of Light, and the Blessed item perk was nerfed from 10 to 30% increased healing effectiveness to 5 to 20%. So you're going to be getting less healing bonus from that Blessed item perk. Now for Hatchet, they wanted to make the throwing tree more appealing, so that one did receive some small buffs, not anything out of the ordinary or crazy, but minor tweaks to make it a little more appealing, probably for PvP. They wanted to make Infected Throw much more valuable than it was right now. Then in terms of Great Axe, this one basically received very minor balancing, no real buffs or nerfs. Bows kind of fell in the same line as Great Axe, some balancing, few bug fixes, but no buffs in general. But let's go ahead and let's talk about the sword really quick. So with this update, they wanted to make Leaping Strike feel better. So they upped the damage, they reduced the cooldown, and they sped up the recovery animation to make it easier to transition to other attacks with Leaping Strike specifically. So keep that in mind. If you're a Leaping Strike guy, then this is going to change things up a little bit and improve your life. Fire Staff did get some nerfs. They actually nerfed the basic attack damage of Fire Staff because they felt like its standard attacks were doing much more damage than they should, but they did buff Pillar of Fire and Flamethrower. They also reduced a ton of passive nodes, so Fire Staff got nerfed pretty hard. Pillar of Fire and Flamethrower did get significant buffs, so they're trying to offset that a little bit. Now in terms of your Spear did receive some buffs, so its lesser used abilities are a little bit more viable, right? So the Coup de Grace, which is a follow-up attack on Sweep, got a buff and is now flagged as a heavy attack, which is actually really, really good because this allows it to trigger heavy-related passives. This is a big thing considering how nice of a flow those two skills are and how easily you can capitalize on heavy attack passives. Then Skewer, Perforate, and Cyclone all got buffs, so they're stronger abilities. Now next up is the good old Ice Gauntlet, right? Everybody's fan favorite crowd control piece of equipment. So this patch was aimed at reducing the effectiveness of some of its maxed out combinations. So Ice Storm, the time between ticks was increased, so it's going to apply less. Wind Chill was buffed. Ice Shower had its cooldown increased by 10 seconds. So instead of 20-second cooldown, you're looking at a 30-second cooldown. Now this is big, so Entombed. So Entombed players can no longer be healed by outside players. And it's had its health reduced to 50% of its max player health instead of 100%. And then the damage of the breakout was severely reduced. So Entombed is not going to be as impactful as it has been. Ice Pylon got some nice buffs, and then a lot of miscellaneous passives got nerfed. So overall, I would say the Ice Gauntlet took a significant nerf and should be less effective or less overpowered than it has been. The last two are the Rapier and Musket. So the Rapier got some cooldown adjustments, that's about it. And then the Musket is kind of following suit with the Spear, and they're buffing some of the lesser used abilities to give more variety. Basically, a lot of things in the Trapper tree are being heavily buffed. That way you actually want to use Sticky Bomb, traps, and all of those type of things. So if you're a Musket main, go out there and check that out. They also buffed the Musket's base damage by 2.5% to make it a little bit more deadly. So let's talk about the last couple notes before we wrap this one up. They added a new set of weapons designed by the participants of the Battle for New World event. These are tier 5 and they can roll legendary with a gear score of 600, so look for those out in the game. They also added some new named items from the named Vanguard Knights. So again, look out for those knights and try to collect them all. They also fixed the near impossible to find drop chances of Fey Iron, Void Metal, Phase Fiber, etc. There was a bug in the code that resulted in a near 0% chance to find these, so these should appear much more often and hopefully lower the price for all of those top-end pieces of gear. So overall, folks, I think this is an awesome first content patch for the game. I mean, we got new weapons, new enemies, new weapon types, reworked quests, balancing passes, tons of fixes, but I do want to hear from everyone else. What is your favorite change? And if you stopped playing, will this be enough to bring you back to check out the new stuff? Thank you all so much for watching. This has been Vulkan, and I'll talk to you next time.